Muhammad Ali had done the impossible, recapturing the heavyweight title from George Foreman. But he was not satisfied. There was one man who'd given him too much trouble, one man who could be pointed to as evidence that perhaps Ali was not the greatest of all time. That man was Smokin' Joe Frazier. The two had met twice previously. Their first encounter, the fight of the century, had already become ingrained in American psyche as one of the greatest matches in history. The insane action had been fueled in part by the intense personal dislike the two champions felt for each other. Ali had so enraged Joe that in his locker room before the fight, Frazier had prayed to God to help him kill Ali. When the fight first began, Ali had seemed capable of handling Frazier easily, proving himself the first opponent with the talent to read Frazier's erratic rhythm, the reflexes to spot small openings, and the speed to take advantage of them. But then, Frazier had begun to penetrate Ali's defenses, his erratic bobs and weaves getting past Ali's renowned rapid-fire lead hand. Frazier was soon thumping shots into his rival's body, doubling him over and enticing him to lower his guard. The result was a back-and-forth battle for the ages. But the way Frazier leaped into his lead hook let him rapidly cover an incredible amount of distance, and it was Ali who had tasted the canvas, cementing Frazier's triumph and destroying any and all doubt about who was the real heavyweight champion of the world. The two would meet again only a few years later. Circumstances had changed, and both were now top contenders, fighting for a chance to take their title back from George Foreman. The two men's intense dislike for each other was again showcased on national television a few days before the bout, when a real fight broke out between them on the set of a talk show. For their second fight, Ali had planned numerous ways to negate Frazier's aggressive style. He stopped short to lead him into flurries, kept his elbows in tight when clinching so Frazier could not pummel his hands through, and used Frazier's head movement against him, using one punch to lead Frazier into another. But Frazier began to time and counter Ali's uppercuts, a punch that had been a major boon to him just a few rounds prior. Ali had been forced to push Frazier back and fight him toe-to-toe in the center of the ring, moving towards Frazier's hook to cut angles and stay center. Ali stole the later rounds, turning the fight around and avenging his loss. Leading up to the fight, Ali continued his old shenanigans, holding up a gorilla meant to represent Frazier and proclaiming, "It'll be a killa, a chilla, a thrilla when I get the gorilla in Manila." As always, Frazier was not amused. To quote the man himself, "I still despised him for trying to misrepresent me to the public. No one gave his heart and soul to the sport as I did. This was a nasty, envious, mean-spirited egomaniac who still couldn't stand the fact that in the biggest fight of his life, I'd put him on his ass." No one could have suspected that this fight would surpass the other two, becoming the only one of their three encounters where one fighter did not make it to the final round. The night came, and both men stood squared up in the center of the ring for the third time. Ali yelled threats at his rival, wide-eyed. Joe simply retorted, "I'm gonna kill you, Clay. You're dead." Ali's corner was managed by the legendary coach Angelo Dundee. His opposite for this fight was Eddie Futch, considered by many to be the greatest coach who ever lived. The bell rang. Ali planted himself in the center of the ring, squared up, flat-footed, hands high. True to his word, he let his fists fly early, looking to knock Frazier out in the first round. Despite all of his talk, no one had predicted that Ali would actually come out so aggressively. It was like the two had picked up where they'd left off in their first fight, almost as if this were simply the next round. Although Ali was being reckless opening up so quickly against Joe Frazier, there was a method to his madness. Frazier was known to be a bad starter. His style required time to read his opponent's tempo and get into a groove. Only then could he slip and weave his way inside to crowd and counter. Ali looked to take advantage of Frazier before he had time to figure him out, so he set a furious pace and threw his hardest shots from the opening bell. Frazier's plan was to rush Ali and hurry him into making a mistake. He bobbed down low and presented himself as an easy target, looking to draw and counter, his hands fluidly switching from high guard to cross guard. Futch's plan for Frazier was to have him once again counter Ali's unorthodox, open uppercuts. He waded into Ali's punches, crouching low before exploding into his blows. But unfortunately for Frazier, Ali was not throwing uppercuts, a punch known for being the most defensive strike in a boxer's toolkit. Ali was all offense. Eventually, Frazier tempted fate one too many times. It was not an uppercut, but a tight hook that slammed into Frazier as he charged in, stunning him. When Ali saw his unshakable, unstoppable rival wobbled in the first round, he went ballistic, unloading everything he had. But Frazier was made of tougher stuff, and got into Ali's rhythm just in time, weaving in between his attacks and pressing forward to put Ali on his back foot. Frazier walked to his corner having lost the first round, but with far better chances of winning the fight for having gotten past it. The second quickly arrived. Only a few seconds in, something happened that would drastically change the course of the fight. Ali grabbed the back of Frazier's neck, looking to reserve his energy early so he could later explode into action. But the referee, who had received a talking from Frazier's coach about this exact scenario, pulled Ali's hand away. When Ali tried the tactic again a moment later, the referee once more warned Ali, astonishing him by putting his own hand over Ali's neck to make sure he got the point. Ali was quickly forced to change tactics. He now looked to slow Frazier's pursuit by employing an extended guard. Holding his lead hand in front of Frazier's eyes, Ali tracked his head movement, steering him off course and blocking his vision. If Ali could not smother Frazier's attacks at close range, then it was best to not let him get close at all. Ali, a master boxer, expertly led Frazier into his punches. He used slower, off-rhythm feints to entice Frazier into slipping into vulnerable positions, and then upped the cadence of his next punches to exploit the new opening. But despite that, Frazier only upped the pace. Undeterred, as always, Frazier managed to close the distance. Ali's extended guard left his stomach and ribs wide open, and this was a major vulnerability against Joe Frazier. Unable to clinch when Frazier did get through his defenses, Ali was forced to simply cover up, taking the brunt of Frazier's lethal hooks on his guard, before pushing him back to the center of the ring. The bell sounded the end of the round. Annoyed at Frazier's relentless aggression even after having taken several high-impact blows, Ali yelled, "You dumb chump you," as Frazier walked away. Frazier waved him off dismissively. Ali, still believing an early knockout to be a certainty, blew kisses to the crowd in between rounds. At the start of the third, he made the few punches Frazier had landed in the second appear to be pure luck. He now paired his tight guard with his extended lead hand, mixing in his offbeat jab to set up harder shots. But Frazier, who Angelo Dundee referred to as an Energizer Bunny in boxing trunks, shrugged off Ali's punches as if they were nothing and marched forward, closer and closer. Ali was catching Frazier with the same tight hooks that had rocked him in the first, but Frazier didn't seem to notice he was getting hit. Ali's feints were still setting up several solid shots, but Frazier was now just simply taking them and returning one of his own. It was becoming more and more dangerous for Ali as Frazier got into his groove. All out of room, Ali shelled up in the corner. He invited Frazier to unload on his guard, pushed him away, and then, just as he had against George Foreman, called him back. According to the referee, Ali was reciting derogatory poetry for Frazier as he wailed on him, as if he were trying to win a boxing match and a rap battle all at the same time. Ali's hope was that he could incite Frazier into throwing wide, unfocused, sloppy punches that he could then deflect, smother, and throw off course, just as he had done with George Foreman. But as Frazier put it, was no dope he was gonna rope this time. Sit on the ropes and he was gonna pay. I hit the chump whenever and wherever, the way Rocky Marciano used to do to guys. Arms, ribs, whatever was exposed, I beat on it. While it may have looked as though Ali was simply brushing aside Frazier's blows to the spectators in the crowd, each punch Ali absorbed required pinpoint accuracy and timing to deflect the impact and keep his guard intact. Frazier knew that Ali was bluffing and would be incapable of such a feat in just a few short rounds. After a minute on the ropes, Ali suddenly opened up, throwing a flurry of 6 punches in under a second. Frazier blocked or weaved around each one of them, then countered Ali's next attempt. Ali tried again, this time missing 5 in a row, but now it was Ali's chance to show his resilience, throwing a 4th blinding fast flurry. Again Ali missed, and again Frazier countered. Now Ali threw for a 5th time. Joe returned fire, but Ali rode the hook back, sidestepped off angle, and finally caught Frazier with 2 thudding rear hands. Frazier charged forward, looking to pay Ali back, and then some. But unlike Frazier, Ali could fight just as well moving backwards as forwards. He rebounded off his back foot, catching Frazier with a chopping right and landing flush with the long lead hook. Not to be outdone, Frazier gave chase, catching Ali with the best punch he'd landed so far. Ali tried to play it off, wobbling his legs dramatically, but the reality was, he'd been shook. It was only the third round. The Thrilla in Manila was beginning to surpass the two epic fights that came before it. Now, going into the fourth, each man had already been badly shook by the other. With any other pair of fighters, this may have made them more cautious, more calculating. The round began with the same fire and fury as the last had ended. Frazier crowded Ali, weaved under his attacks, and landed a solid shot of his own. But Ali gave it less thought than a mosquito, continuing to throw and ducking underneath Frazier's return fire to escape the ropes. He knocked Frazier off balance as he pivoted away, and then caught him from the side with a sneaky, jarring right. The punch seemed to set the tone of the round, which proved overwhelmingly favorable for Ali. He led with crosses, pounding them into Frazier's skull. He ducked outside of Frazier's hooks, and controlled distance with both hands, using one to lead Frazier's head into the other. But Frazier's coach was not concerned. He figured that Frazier's frenzied pace was rushing Ali, not allowing him time to set himself and get the full weight of his body into his punches. Only time would tell if he were right. Frazier, meanwhile, started to pick away at any opening he could find. He received a warning from the referee on a low blow, but continued to target Ali's hips, destroying his mobility. Frazier had done the same during their first encounter, and Ali had been in pain each time he took a step for a week afterwards. But despite Frazier's best attempts, the fourth had clearly belonged to Ali. The fifth would not be so kind to the champion. Within the first minute of the fifth, it became apparent that cracks had started to appear in Ali's defense. Frazier was becoming better and better at getting around Ali's long lead hand, which he referred to derisively as his feather duster. He discovered he could knock Ali's arm aside and come up underneath, exploiting his exposed ribs. Now he began to dismantle Ali's high guard as well, jabbing high to provoke Ali to raise his hands, and then sinking in a deep shot that tore into his ribs. Inch by inch, Frazier moved in closer with each exchange. As Frazier himself put it, "I began to rev the engine. In taking on Clay, you have to crowd him and accelerate the tempo, not let him work at the pace he wants. Hurry him, and he'll begin to huff and puff. It became a battle of survival. Now that's my kind of fight." Frazier soon had Ali pressed up against the ropes, his arms weary, his legs tired. He no longer had the strength to shell up and hold firm as he had done in the second. He tried to fight from a crossguard, his body turned away, shielding himself from the brunt of Frazier's attacks. The great irony, which Ali probably would not have appreciated at the time, was that years ago the legendary Archie Moore had tried to teach Ali how to use the crossguard, so that he didn't always have to rely on his speed and mobility. But Ali had retorted that he didn't need it, as he planned to retire young. There was no doubt that Frazier had started to smoke. He dodged almost every punch Ali threw, pushed him back into the corner when he tried to escape, and pummeled his hands through to break Ali's guard and set up short, jarring punches. Frazier at last had the chance to follow through on Fletch's strategy. He leapt out of his crouch to avoid Ali's uppercut, slamming a tremendous hook into the champion's jaw. All said and done, Ali was trapped against the ropes for nearly 2 minutes. If the fifth could be called challenging for Ali, the sixth was nothing but a complete disaster. Frazier was now timing the tight lead hooks that Ali had used to rock him in the first. A leaping gazelle punch whipped Ali's head back near the start of the round, and another connected not soon after. He chased Ali from corner to corner, short body shots tenderizing his ribs and hips. But while Ali may not have had the best guard, his head movement was still otherworldly. A well-timed turn of his head was often all that saved him from fight-ending punches. Although it was bad, Ali wasn't out of the fight yet. Halfway through the round, he caught Frazier with another tight lead hook that sent his mouthpiece flying across the ring. The announcers mistakenly thought the mouthpiece had been Ali's, and Frazier, all too happy to go along with the story, later bragged about knocking Ali's mouthpiece across the ring in his autobiography. But all said and done, he may as well have. As Ali walked back to his corner, all thoughts of an easy fight and early knockout had vanished from his mind. Now, it was about survival. In the corner, Dundee berated Ali, telling him, "We blew those rounds. You don't rest on the ropes against Joe Frazier." Ali knew he was right. He was in this for the long haul, and if he wanted to win, he needed to even up the rounds. He decided it was time to pay Frazier back. Ali danced and kept dancing, skipping, cross-stepping, and pivoting across the ring, his legendary jab whipping out like a snake. It pestered Frazier, targeting either eye, lashing out from 3 different directions, occasionally accompanied by a sort of rear hand jab, as Ali skewed his hips to work different angles. Most importantly, it set up Ali's stronger punches. But Ali could not dance forever. For all the punches Frazier had taken, punches that had knocked out far bigger, stronger men, he was somehow coming faster than ever. Ali was forced to rest on the ropes more and more often the last minute of the round. Unable to clinch, he took a multitude of tremendous blows. As he walked back to the corner, he knew that he did not have enough left to dance the next time the bell called him out to fight. For the last round, Ali had flown across the ring, but now, Frazier had clipped the butterfly's wings. But if Ali could no longer float like a butterfly, he could still sting like a bee. In the 8th, unable to dance, unable to clinch, Ali instead stood his ground and went toe-to-toe with Smokin' Joe Frazier. The result was one of the most brutal rounds in the history of combat sports. Ali landed early and often, barely bothering to set up his shots. This was not intelligent boxing, this was target practice. Frazier was taking 2 or 3 shots to land one big one, a strategy that had served him well before. But these were not the light, stinging shots that Frazier had become accustomed to taking from Ali. Ali set himself low, rounded his center, and loaded his punches with the full force of his body. Becoming frustrated, Frazier threw a tremendous hook, but Ali pulled back, and now Frazier had thrown his body out of position. Ali took full advantage of the situation. But then, midway through the round, it became apparent that Ali had given all he had to give. He had punched himself out, and now his arms were just as tired as his legs. Frazier spent the remainder of the round destroying Ali's body, persuading Ali to lower his guard so he could target his head. At one point, he pounded a thudding shovel hook into Ali's stomach, then knocked his hips back into the ring post, drawing gasps from the crowd. Ali was happy to leave the 8th behind him. It was unclear to many how either man had remained standing. In the corner, Ali's ring doctor was wondering the same thing. Ali thought he was dying, he would later recall. He was at the ends of exhaustion. He was having trouble staying awake between rounds. This time, Ali would not be so quick to recover. He spent the majority of the next 2 rounds in sluggish retreat, most of his punches sailing harmlessly over Frazier's head. Although he landed well occasionally, Ali mostly spent his time dancing from corner to corner before languishing on the ropes, throwing little, clinching when he had the chance, and covering up the best he could. A small respite for Ali was that Frazier had now started to let his emotions get the best of him, and was wasting shots hunting Ali's head while he still had an upright posture. Had Frazier stuck to Futch's plan and battered his arms, the champion may have lost his ability to punch as well as dance. Still, while it could have been worse for Ali, the situation was far from ideal. By the end of the 10th, Frazier had evened up the fight. Ali decided it was time to test his legs. He came out dancing. Frazier quickly caught his prey, driving a hard hook into Ali's chest and shoving him into the ropes. But Ali turned Frazier, and now it was Joe against the ropes. For the first time in the fight, Frazier stopped moving forward. He stood there, bobbing and weaving to stay safe. Frazier broke the stalemate with a leaping left hand, but his pursuit now came in increments. Frazier would later explain, "For me, this night was a tiring one, given how damn hot it was in the arena. 110 degrees, they said. When I'd suck in air, it was like walking into an oven." Frazier swatted a lazy right hand at Ali near the corner, and Ali repaid him with a left hook off a tight cross, jerking Frazier's head around. The punch seemed to finally wake Frazier. Frazier upped the pace, and now it was Ali who dramatically slowed, taking a shearing uppercut as he tried to clinch, and then 3 solid blows to the body just a few seconds later. Ali stayed in the corner for a full minute, Frazier beating on him with either hand, doubling up on hooks to the body and head. It seemed that Ali's rally had been short-lived, the last gasp of a dying man. But according to Ali, his time on the ropes in the 11th was painful, but necessary. He would later explain his behavior in the round. A man who rides a horse and starts off too fast is going to have his horse tired before the race is over. You gotta know when to speed up, when to coast, and when to rest. While Ali was able to pull away from many headshots, he was allowing his body to be used as a punching bag. It was a completely reckless strategy, but it paid off. With under a minute left, Ali, his strength returned, grabbed onto Frazier and pulled him to the center of the ring. Startled, Frazier tried to grab onto the ropes, but the ref helped to rip his hand away. The two men now stood in the center and threw, Ali paying back the beating he'd received on the ropes tenfold. It was now Frazier who ended the round with his back against the ropes. Dundee, watching from the corner, noticed how easy it had been for Ali to move Frazier around. He wondered just how much strength he had left. To make matters worse for Frazier, his eyes were beginning to swell from all the punishment he'd taken throughout the fight. In the 12th, he looked to pay Ali back. Gritting his teeth against 3 hard blows, he managed to press the champion up against the ropes and unload on him almost immediately. But Frazier had finally slowed enough for Ali to get in his rhythm, landing 8 out of 9 blazing fast punches before deflecting Frazier's return fire. Frazier had kept up a breakneck pace for the last 12 rounds. He was like a marathon runner, maintaining a steady pace for miles, but gradually weakening. Ali was more like a sprinter, taking long breaks between activity and then unleashing all the power he had saved up in short, powerful bursts. There were upsides and downsides to both strategies. Ali was under constant pressure and taking consistent punishment. But, unlike Frazier, he was able to store up strength and pick his spots. And so, Frazier had softened enough by the 12th for Ali to push him away, if only momentarily. He only had a moment before Frazier reclosed the distance and filled the gap. But a moment was enough. While Ali's long arms did not allow for much power at close range, his punches still tore into Frazier's face, exacerbating the swelling in his already damaged eyes. Ali danced away near the end of the round, trying to make Frazier believe that he was still fresh. But the truth was, while it was Frazier who had appeared to slow, it was Ali who was beyond exhaustion. In his corner, Frazier informed Futch that his eyes had gotten worse. He had spent the last half of the round fighting in a kind of haze, barely able to make out Ali's punches as they barreled towards his head. Thinking on his feet, Futch came up with a plan. In his own words, "So I told Frazier to stay back about 8 inches, and made him stand up a little straighter." Futch figured that from further back, Frazier would at least have time to see the punches coming. Across the ring, Ali's head drooped forward, the champion now tired in a way he had never experienced before. He felt as though any second he may vomit or pass out. But Dundee had sensed an opportunity and screamed at Ali, "Look at him! He ain't got no power left. Go get him." Ali had sensed it too. He dug deep and came into the 13th, looking for a knockout. The two met in the middle of the ring, Ali pestering his rival's eyes with stinging jabs, and breaking his own rhythm to lead Frazier into hard crosses. Far from helping him, Frazier's new altered posture left him more open. Midway through the round, Ali slammed a thunderous rear hook into Frazier's jaw, once again sending his mouthpiece flying across the ring, this time out into the audience. Sensing the time had finally come, Ali threw everything he had left at Frazier, landing hard right after hard right, giving all he had to put down the man who had once knocked him to the canvas and denied him his victory in the biggest fight of his life. Never had Ali inflicted so much sustained damage to his rival, and Frazier nearly lost his legs from under him more than once. "I fought him best I could," Frazier would later relate. "I could barely see. I was fighting on instinct, bobbing and weaving. Clay was timing me." But Frazier refused to fall. To quote Ali, "For the 3rd time, Joe Frazier surprised me with his stamina, his relentlessness, and the gunpowder in his blows. I opened his lip and closed his eyes, but he still kept coming, forcing me onto the ropes, making me deliver power when I didn't even know if it was still there." Although he had nearly been knocked out twice in the round, Frazier was still able to throw bombs. Somehow still standing, still fighting, Frazier punctuated the round with a thunderous left hook at the bell. In Frazier's corner, Coach Eddie Futch had a difficult decision to make. Frazier could barely see and had taken a dangerous amount of damage. On the other hand, Frazier had still gotten tremendous punches through near the end of the round. Futch, one of the most perceptive coaches in combat sports, suspected that Ali was close to done. More than anything, he knew how much defeating Ali meant to Joe. He decided to give Frazier one last round to get the job done. In fact, he was right. Ali, already past his known limits in the 13th, was in uncharted territory. Even he did not know how much he had left to give. But in the 14th, he gave it all. The bell called both out to face each other for the last time. The two circled, dead tired, the look of a wounded animal in the eyes of both. 3 fights, 41 rounds, 2 championships, and 5 years had brought them here. They had tested each other in every way possible, only to find that even now, their skill, physicality, and willpower were nearly even. Their bodies failing, their will driving them on, the fight balanced on a razor's edge. But then, just as it seemed as if both men had spent everything they had, somehow, Ali came to life. He threw one last furious assault, throwing punches as if he'd just come out for the first. But Frazier endured, and he was still looking for that one shot. Frazier sunk low and hurled himself forward with the last of his strength. But this time, Ali pulled away. Frazier crashed into him, and now, both of them were far past spent. Frazier walked forward, his legs giving way, hands drooping below his waist. Ali stumbled in between punches, pausing and taking big, gasping breaths before firing off his hardest shots, over and over, a look of complete disbelief on his face. To quote Ali, when someone asked a marathon runner what goes through their mind in the last mile or two, he said that you ask yourself, why am I doing this? You get so tired. It takes so much out of you mentally. It makes you go a little insane. I was thinking that at the end. Why am I doing this? What am I doing in here against this beast of a man? It's so painful. I must be crazy. Frazier marched forward on sheer willpower, taking everything that Ali threw his way. And then, it was over. The round ended, and Smoke and Joe Frazier was still standing. Through all the rounds and all the fights, Ali had never once put him down. Barely able to see, the referee guided Frazier back to his corner. As Ali sat down, he had a terrifying realization. He was not sure how much longer he could go on. Of course, he didn't know about Futch's decision. All he knew was that Frazier had taken him to his absolute limit, to a place that he'd never been before, a place he would later call the closest thing to death. In Frazier's corner, Coach Eddie Futch, who'd been witness to fighters die in the ring before, had seen enough. "I'm going to stop it," Futch told Frazier. "You're taking too much punishment." Joe protested. "No, don't. I want him, boss." Blind, battered, beaten, Frazier was in no condition to fight. "It's all over, son," Futch told him. "No one will ever forget what you did here today." And so the greatest fight in boxing history came to a close. Ali could not believe it. He stood and raised his hands in victory. A moment later, he fell to the floor. To quote the man himself, "I was so relieved, so tired, and in so much pain that my knees buckled, and I stretched right out where I was, right there in the middle of the ring." He had taken 440 hard, solid punches from Joe Frazier. Many throughout the years have romanticized the so-called lost round, wondering what would have happened if Frazier had been allowed to come out for the 15th. But the truth is, both men had already given what they had to give. Both had left a piece of themselves in that ring, and for each, it was a piece that they would never fully get back. Perhaps Ali said it best. "We went to Manila as champions, Joe and me, and we came back as old men." Thanks for watching. I've left a list of sources used for all 3 fights in the comments below, along with links to my books on footwork and power. From the Modern Martial Artist, this has been David Christian, wishing you happy training.